The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
While fans and analysts debate the Buckeyes' playoff chances, one thing is clear: Ryan Day isn't going anywhere.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, regardless of what Ohio State does in the playoff this year, Ross Bjork has a full vote of confidence in Ryan Day, and Day will be the head coach of the Buckeyes in 2025. Now, I know I said it's a feel-good Friday at the top of the show, and some of you may have heard that news, and it didn't make you feel good. Some of you may be fans out there that are out there saying, well, if Ryan Day goes 1-0 in the playoff, he's out of here. If Ryan Day doesn't make it to the Final Four, he's up out of here. If Ryan Day doesn't win a national championship this year, he's up out of here. And I know there are fans listening to this show or watching it right now that fall into that camp. But Ross Bjork, his boss, has a full vote of confidence, and he is one that is speaking in absolutes, and he's doubling down on something he said after the Michigan loss. And regardless of what you think about Ryan Day, that's the kind of boss you want. You want a boss that says, no matter what is happening right now, no matter what the Boo Birds are saying, no matter what, I am analyzing you as a head coach. I am analyzing the things you have done, not just this year, but during your 6-year tenure as head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and currently right now has a full vote of confidence in Ryan Day, and that's the kind of boss Ryan Day wants to work for. That's the kind of boss people want to have, is one that believes in them. But Ryan Day got to do something, man. I'm not sitting here saying Ryan Day has a full vote of confidence from me. I mean, trust me, you have heard me earlier this week. Myself and Jason Fitz of Yahoo Sports came on the show, and we kind of discussed our concerns and some of the hesitations that we have with Ryan Day coaching in big-time games. What's going to happen on December 21st in prime time? It's a big-time game. I know it's a playoff game. I know there will be a mix of Ohio State running the show and the playoff running the show. However, whichever way you want to put it, it's a big-time game. And sometimes Ryan Day in big-time games, you don't get the Ryan Day you always want. However, Ryan Day can do some great things with the confidence that his boss has. Use it. Allow that to fuel him to do bigger and better things next year and further. Now, Ross Bjork didn't say anything about 2026 at all. It was the question of the conversation was focused on 2025, and it was regardless of what happens in the CFP. Ohio State could literally lose to Tennessee, and Ross Bjork's not going to fire Ryan Day. Now, Ryan Day does have a $37 million buyout, and I do believe that is factoring into the decision to keep Ryan Day. So I think there's a lot of things Ryan Day has done well. He's 66-10. He's won 2 Big Ten titles. He's been to the playoff 3 times in 4 years. And one thing I noted about Ryan Day, he's never missed a playoff 2 years in a row. Made it in 19, made it in 20, missed it in 21, went back in 22. Missed it in 23, went back in 24. I think that is another big reason why Ross Bjork has the full vote of confidence in Ryan Day. Because there's a lot of coaches out there, Lane Kiffin, there's a lot of coaches out there that can't say that don't have that on their resume. There are a lot of coaches, Dabo Swinney, that can't say that in the past 6 years they've made the playoff 3 times in 4 years, or they never missed it 2 years in a row. A lot of coaches out there can't say that. There's a lot of good things Ryan Day has done. And you know that I'm a little bit down on Ryan Day now. I was down on Ryan Day a year ago, especially after the Cotton Bowl, which I'm not going to dodge because it is on his resume. But something has to change with Ryan Day. It is not just regarding the losses to Michigan. Right now, the way the team is constructed on offense and on defense, heavy impact with the safeties, with the secondary, with the corners. Instead of putting the emphasis on the defensive line, it's a safety-driven defense. Now, that's what Jim Knowles wants, but also in actuality, I think sometimes the guys up front aren't making the impact that is needed from an elite defensive line, which is what Ohio State should have. I am going to echo something that Urban Meyer said about every player and every coach that he coaches or that he worked with. If he hired you, he wanted you to pursue being the best position coach at your position. If you're Heartline, best receiver coach in the country. If you're Tony Alford or now Carlos Loughlin, best running back coach in the country. And he wants you to take that mindset and pursue being the best at your position group, coaching that thing in the entire country. If you're a running back, if you're a JT Barrett or a J.K. Dobbins or fill-in-the-blank player, one of the Bosas, Sam Hubbard, whoever it is, he wants you to be the best at your position, at your role in the entire country. And I think that's what's missing at Ohio State. And it's under Ryan Day. No matter if Ross Bjork believes in Ryan Day or not, there are guys out there that I don't know if they have the mindset of pursuing being the best at your position. Now, maybe they do, and they just don't put it out there on the field because they can't. I don't know. But I do believe there is something out there that people aren't working to be the best in the country at their position. Do I think Will Howard is working to be the best quarterback in the country? Maybe. We also know that that's not going to be a reality of him and to have a player that he is. Will Howard's done a lot of great things this year. I think there's limitations to him that sometimes hinder the offense. Now, Jeremiah Smith wants to be the best in the country. I think Emeka Egbuka. Literally, if Emeka Egbuka was not behind Jeremiah Smith, he would probably be the best number one receiver in the country. There's a lot of good receivers out there, but Emeka Egbuka, man, smooth operator, baby. That dude just gets it done. There are guys on Caleb Downs, best safety in the country. Lathan Ransom. If it weren't for Caleb Downs, he'd be right there in the conversation for being one of the best safeties in the country. But when it comes to the O-line, the D-line, some of the other very important positions, I don't know if the players have the mindset of being the best at their position in the country. Is that a reflection of Ryan Day? I think so. But even though that's true, Ryan Day's done a lot of winning. Now, the sad part about Ryan Day's resume, with there only being 10 losses, we can look out there and say what the 10 losses are. I don't know why I want to run through them. PTSD might kick in, being a little sarcastic there. But I don't want to run through those losses, man. But those losses are real. But Ryan Day's found ways to tweak things last year heading into this year. He tweaked things in the middle of the season. He's tweaking things right now. Some of the tweaks are positive. Some of the things are negative. But Ryan Day's not afraid to try to tweak things and try to alter things, try to fix things. But sometimes when you're tweaking things, some things need to be tweaked, some things don't. And that's where danger sets in. Because sometimes people try to tweak stuff that doesn't need to be messed with, and it leads to disaster. At the same time, there are things that need to be tweaked with the defense in the middle of the year, and it leads to a very successful run by the Buckeyes defense. Ross Bjork believes in Ryan Day and says Day will be the head coach of the Buckeyes in 2025.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
New man on campus, specifically new quarterback.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We like big-time plays. We like a lot of highlights when you're talking about what to get out of your quarterback position. And anytime you're moving on from a guy who led you to a 9-3 football season, you want to be kind of wowed by the quarterback that comes in. Is it fair for Duke fans to be a little bit wowed by what they're going to get in Darian Mensah, Connor?
Yeah, I think so. I think more than anything, you're wowed and encouraged by the room for growth there is with Darian Mensah. Like he's a 1-year starter. He's got, the 1 year under his belt and a redshirt season. He was very lightly recruited. I think rivals had him as a 2-star, and maybe only logged offers from Tulane and maybe a couple FCSs. So it's not like it's certainly a vastly different pedigree than Malik Murphy coming in as a high 4-star with 2 years of Texas under his belt for a team that went to the CFP. With Darian, I mean, you've got some of the same traits and characteristics. You're still not getting a legit dual threat who's going to run for 600 yards on the ground and that kind of thing, but you're getting a little bit more mobility. And like I said, just to go back to it, I mean, I think the enticing thing here is hearing that Darian values getting a Duke degree. I always think it's kind of silly when we talk about these transfers and we talk about how many years of eligibility they have left, because there's nothing that guarantees they're going to use all of them at the school. Like with immediate eligibility for any transfer of any kind, it almost renders that discussion meaningless to me. But hearing that he values a degree, I mean, that gives you some optimism that this is not another 1-year rental, that he wants to be a Duke, that he wants to get his degree, that he wants to put in a couple years. He's got 3 of them. So maybe he uses all 3 and maybe takes Duke's football program to the next level and they stay ahead of the school that just hired a 72-year-old curmudgeon as their football coach.
Yeah, a lot going on in the world of ACC football, particularly within our state, down the road there in Chapel Hill. Fun things to kind of monitor there. But, I mean, this was pretty quick. We'll get to Malik Murphy here in just a little bit. But just how rapid this went, I hear a lot of chatter in the world of football these days, and it's becoming more and more true that, in terms of high school recruiting, we focus a lot on basketball recruiting in the Duke side of things, obviously. In many positions, you kind of want to be the last school to get a visit, to be able to kind of make your pitch to this player about what kind of impact they can make at your team. That has been the opposite storyline across the country in this transfer portal. I mean, guys say, I'm going to go here, here, and here. And so frequently, they never make it to those future spots. The first place they go is able to kind of get them locked in and solid. So good for Duke to be there right out of the gates for this.
I think it's a maturity thing. And I think when you're a high school kid and you get their last visit, that's when you're in the prime position, because that's the kid that has been wooed by other people. And now you're able to make the great final impression. The kid in the transfer portal who's already been through the high school recruiting process once, even if a kid like Darian, who was lightly recruited, you want to get there first, because that is a kid that probably doesn't, most of the time, that's a kid that doesn't want to be recruited again. He just wants to figure out where he's going to go.
Right.
Like the joke that I still make a year later, when Shohei Ohtani goes from the Angels and has everybody bidding for his services and just throwing out outrageous numbers, he stays in the same city. He goes to the Dodgers. And it just, like, at the end of the day, guys just don't want to move.
Yeah, we saw it this summer with Juan Soto. He doesn't want to move from New York. He just goes from the Yankees to the Mets.
These guys just don't want to move. So I think along those lines, like, you don't want to drag the process out when you're in the portal. And it's also part of it's the timing, because all of these schools, when you enter the portal right away, they want to get you onto campus before Christmas. So they want to hammer you out. They also want to get you in for spring ball, and to be in for spring ball, you have to be enrolled for the spring semester. That enrollment for the spring semester has to occur before, like, it varies school to school, but it usually
before it starts.
Yeah. Think of the first couple of days of January as the drop dead day. And that's, 3 weeks away right now. It seems far away, but God, December goes by like that. So that's where these schools, I think it's not more pressure than they put on high school kids to get an early commitment and get them locked in and signed up, but it's a different type of pressure. It's like, we want you here in the spring because we want you learning the offense when you're not, 600 miles away and on somebody else's campus doing somebody else's workouts.
The visit to Durham clearly paid off. It worked. Darian Mensah commits to Duke. He's there Tuesday night inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. The Crazies do the infamous come sit with us song and dance there, bringing him across the floor to kind of enjoy a little bit of that game with the Cameron Crazies, experience Duke to its absolute fullest, and now he gets the opportunity to be the Blue Devils quarterback. NIL plays a factor in everything, and when you're looking across the board, you could see that this is, according to ESPN and so many other outlets, the number one transfer portal target in the country. How soon, Connor, is it until we're in a world where, like, hey, that figure is kind of known for all of these players? Like, this is what it took to get a player like this to come over? Because right now it's kind of all speculation, and schools aren't really putting it out there what they officially agreed to financially with star players. But you and I are smart enough to understand there was something involved behind this business decision made by Mensah.
Oh, absolutely. I saw something said, I think it was even before he went into the portal, that his agents or his agency was founded by Lil Wayne and the grandson of the founder of Anheuser-Busch.
Well, there you go.
To give you an idea of
how we're working with.
just to give you an idea of how wacky of world this has become in like 3 years' time. I'm counting the days, I'm counting the hours. It's a lot of hours, but until we get some kind of collective bargaining and there can be public contracts with this and there can be multi-year deals, I don't know how that happens because the players have the power right now. I have such little tolerance and I spend very little time actually like trying to track down NIL numbers because everybody has every incentive to lie and nobody has any incentive to be truthful.
Yeah.
The schools want bigger numbers out there because other potential recruits or other high school recruits can see those numbers and say, well, if they're giving that guy that much, then
that's real smart.
That's what I can be making, in a year or two. The kids want bigger numbers out there because that's human nature, and you want your friends, your family, you want people to know you're making a lot of money. There's just, like I said, there's no incentive to be truthful when it comes to NIL reporting. I can't stand the on-3 evaluations because they're just guesses. They're based on formula that involves Twitter followers and Instagram followers and all that. And I can't wrap my head around placing any significance or importance on how many Twitter followers somebody has.
You and I got to step our game up. Go follow us, _JJ_Jackson_ He's at Connor O'Neill _DI. Get the followers up, man. We need our NIL evaluation.
My on-3 valuation would be negative money. Like I would have to pay somebody to be sponsored by them.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right, so Duke has a new quarterback. It's Darian Mensah from Tulane.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Washington lands a top transfer tackle.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Because Washington just landed a transfer from one of the best offensive lineman transfer portal prospects. That's Kansas State's Carver Willis, played right tackle for him for the last 2 seasons. We're talking about where he slots in on this offensive line and what else Washington might do in the portal. It's a fun discussion, and you look at some of these numbers, he's really solid. 3 sacks, over 620 pass blocking reps at Kansas State of the last 2 seasons. Honorable All-Big 12 mention, honorable mention All-Big 12. A lot going on here in 2023. What do you think of this?
I think it's essential for Washington to be in that discussion. By the way, I love that you introduced me as host of Locked On College Football and definitely nothing else. So
Yep, that's it.
That's all there is to it. But it's pretty easy to watch this Washington team and not think that both trenches need to be improved dramatically. The offensive line, of course, stood out in the Oregon game with 10 sacks. That tied a program record for Oregon in a single game. And yeah, that Oregon defensive line is really good. But then the very next game that Oregon played, their defensive line got manhandled by Penn State, who ran for 292 yards and only allowed 1 sack and not a whole heck of a lot of pressure with Drew Aller back there. So I think that's an example of where Washington has to get their offensive line back to. And, you know, you and I talked on what was then Locked On Pac-12, RIP, a season ago about how the unheralded part of Washington's amazing 2023 run was the offensive line. And then they won the Joe Moore Award, and you and I are kind of looking around telling people like, see this right here? We told you they've got a bunch of time. So, I mean, this is probably the biggest need. I in the games that I watched Washington this year, of which there were several, the defensive line needs help too. But I'd go to the offensive line before I went to the defensive line because, you know, you can win a shootout if you have an offensive line, but you can't win a shootout if you don't have an offensive line. And so if you don't get into that position in the first place, then having a weak defensive line isn't quite as much of a weakness for the wins and losses department. So I think it makes a lot of sense that they go out and get a guy like this. This is a pretty notable addition. I mean, Kansas State for the last couple of years has been built on one thing in particular, and that's the running game. You know, Avery Johnson, a quarterback, and DJ Giddens, and they brought in the Colorado transfer Dylan Edwards as well.
I'm a huge fan of his, by the way.
Yeah, I am too. And that's what they were built on. So having a foundational piece of that is a really big addition. I think more needed for Washington. They weren't one offensive lineman away, but certainly they are one offensive lineman closer to being what Jed Fish needs to run his offense with maximum efficiency.
So I certainly agree with you there. There's one thing you didn't mention in all this, and I think is the biggest key point, and that's Damon Williams, where you talk about needing upgrades on the defensive line as well. I certainly agree. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But when I look at this Washington team, it's about building around Damon Williams, something Lars and I have talked about on this show ad nauseum over the last couple of weeks. And when I look at this addition, that's exactly what it is. Where Washington signed 5 guys in the 2025 class. They got a couple of exciting redshirt freshmen. I'm a huge fan of Justin Hilkema's, somebody they signed in the 24 class that they brought with them from Arizona. And then you look at some other young offensive linemen on the roster. I think Maximus Becree, who played left tackle for Washington this past season, was solid until he dislocated his thumb against Iowa, which effectively ended his season. We haven't seen him since. We'll probably see him in a bowl game, but that's just where I kind of look at this and say, yeah, absolutely. You want to build around Damon. You talk about the Oregon game, 10 sacks in that game. What's going to, go a long way towards, I don't want to say solving those issues, but making them less of an issue. That's going to be a strong tackle. And again, Carver Willis, 3 sacks in 620 pass blocking reps. That's more than good enough for me. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. So I look at all that and I say, yes, this is the kind of guy you want to bring in for a sophomore quarterback that is, has been dubbed the future of the program. No pressure or anything there, but you're going to put those expectations on a guy. You need to make sure you protect him. And, Spencer, we talk about what this world of NIL is. You do a great job of covering all these things over on Locked On College Football. This is the kind of guy who you say, hey, you want to see somebody, pony up that NIL money for one of the best available offensive tackles, which are going for a premium, by the way. This is where you want to see those resources invested. You got to look at this Washington offensive line. Right now, they're going to be replacing a couple of pieces where I look at this 2025 team, and I think that there's still a long way to go. Where Carver Willis does not have a lot of experience at left tackle. Where, some people might say, hey, he might slide in over there. I just talked about Maximus Becree a minute ago. I don't know if 60-something snaps, which he has over there, is going to say this is a left tackle, but you look at him on the right side, Drew Ezepardi, who was, one of the hotter transfer portal names last year at offensive tackle. Maybe you bring him to the bench, you let him compete in the offseason for a starting role, but you pencil Carver Willis in at right tackle right now, and then you do some shuffling up front with, Landon Hatchett probably moving over at center, and you're going to have most likely 2 new guards with Guard Memolar in the transfer portal and Enoch Vamahai being out of eligibility.
So one thing that's interesting about the transfer portal. And I've seen this with just about every single team. Offensive lines are not built through the portal. Who's been the biggest transfer portal story in the last 2 years each offseason, or one of the biggest stories? Colorado,
I'd say your Oregon Ducks.
Oregon is certainly up there, but
Sure.
Even along Oregon's offensive line this year, 4 out of 5 guys are homegrown, and 1 guy is a transfer. Who has been the biggest portal team? Colorado, right? So Colorado is building their roster through the transfer portal. Do you know what Colorado hasn't had either of the 2 years that Deion Sanders has been there? A good offensive line. They haven't been able to run the ball. They have not been able to protect Shedeur Sanders. They were better this year, but the floor was, he was sacked 50 times last year. 5-0 was the, or it might have been 50 something. I don't even remember. It was some obscene number of sacks. So the offensive line, like bringing in Carver Willis, I don't think you bring him in if it's a if it isn't a plug and play situation. That's what most transfers are. Not all. Some guys are depth pieces, and that's okay. But for Willis, I think he's got to come in and start right away, because I don't know. I mean, you could tell me, but I doubt there is a better option waiting on Washington's roster right now to slide in and start at tackle. But this unit up front is still going to have to be built through high school recruiting and development, because the number of players, impact players, that are available every portal cycle along the offensive line, Roman, it's a small number nationally.
I agree.
It's a really small number. The most abundant positions are wide receiver, defensive end, and corner, I would say. The least abundant positions, and I'd kind of put quarterback is in between, because quarterback's not as high by volume, but by percentage, it's closer to defensive end than it is offensive tackle. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like you can go and say, look, we're going to have a transfer quarterback each of the next 3 years. That's okay. You only need 1. But when you're looking to fill out an offensive line, you need 5 guys. You cannot find 5 starters in the transfer portal every single offseason. So that's what I'm curious to see is he slides in to be one piece, but who do they develop to be the other pieces? Because you can't just bring guys in and hit the portal to say, well, that's how we're going to build an offensive line.
So I certainly agree with you there, and that's not the plan. Like it's certainly not the plan where I look at, the only other starter that I truly see right now for the 2025 season is Landon Hatchett at center, where it seems like that's certainly going to be the plan in the middle. That's a guy that, was recruited under Kalen DeBoer's staff. And that's the interesting thing about where Washington's roster is right now, just in terms of still somewhat reeling from the fallout of Kalen DeBoer leaving, where we saw both tackles from the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line go to the NFL draft. That was always going to be the case with Roger Rosengarten going in the second round. He looks like just a fantastic steal right now for the Baltimore Ravens, by the way.
He's great.
Love seeing that. And then Troy Fautano was a first-round pick. We all knew that was going to happen. That was not shocking. And then the interior, that goes the way it did. But you have to remember, they also lost several depth pieces to the portal. Garen Hatchett, who did come back, he was somebody that he went to Oklahoma for the 2024 season. Jalen Clem was a guy that Scott Huff seemed to like. He went to Arizona State, I believe it was. And so they were losing so many pieces. And Jed Fish has had to really piece this together. And I look at, the future. I like Paki Finau, former 4-star recruit. He looks like somebody who might be able to slot in a guard spot. That's a guy that Washington did a really good job of retaining after the whole transition from DeBoer to Fish. And I look at this 25 class and I say, this is why Jed Fish and co invested so heavily in the offensive line. I look at guys like Peter Lange, John Mills, Champ Talia Leah, where all of these names are players that they might not be impact players right away, but in terms of what you need to compete in the Big Ten on the offensive line, the size and all that is there. So if you can, say, hey, we need a guy at 2 other positions to mitigate for the 25 season, and then we know it's full go on the offensive line with all these players we've recruited over the last 2 years of 26, great. But when we talk about Carver Willis, this is that stopgap to get him there. Again, in his final season of eligibility. So I look at that going forward, and I say, yeah, they're in a really good spot for this.